The first time I saw her, I knew two things with terrifying certainty: she would change my life forever, and I was never supposed to be anywhere near her. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a warning, loud and clear, like thunder rolling across a quiet sky before the storm even begins. She stood there, distant yet impossible to ignore, surrounded by invisible walls everyone else seemed to understand but I didn't. And somehow, without a single word between us, my world shifted. Before we go further, take a second. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and love that defies the rules, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles. Stories like this deserve to be felt, remembered, and passed on. I wish I could tell you I walked away that day. That I listened to reason, to logic, to the unspoken rules that everyone else followed so easily. But life doesn't always give you the luxury of distance when your heart has already stepped forward. Her name was Aisha. Even thinking about it now feels like touching something fragile and sacred at the same time. She had this quiet strength about her, the kind that didn't need attention but commanded it anyway. People respected her, admired her, and feared the consequences of crossing the boundaries that surrounded her life. Those boundaries had a name, though no one said it out loud. They were built from expectations, family honor, social rules, and a future that had already been planned long before she ever had a chance to choose it. She was engaged, to someone powerful, someone untouchable in his own way. A man whose shadow stretched far enough to make sure no one dared step into his place. And I was nobody. Just another face in the crowd, trying to build a life one uncertain step at a time. I had nothing to offer her world, no influence, no wealth, no safety. If anything, I was a risk. The kind people avoid, the kind that complicates everything. So when our paths crossed again, it should have meant nothing. But it didn't. It started small, almost invisible. A glance that lasted a second too long. A moment where the noise of the world faded, and it felt like we were the only two people standing in it. It was unsettling, the way something so simple could feel so intense. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was nothing more than curiosity. But curiosity doesn't keep you awake at night. Curiosity doesn't make you replay a single moment over and over again until it feels like a memory you've lived 100 times. Days turned into weeks, and those accidental encounters became something else. Something intentional, though never spoken. We never crossed the lines openly, never gave the world a reason to notice. But in the spaces between silence, something began to grow. And that was the most dangerous part. Because love doesn't always arrive with fireworks and declarations. Sometimes, it creeps in quietly, wrapping itself around your heart before you even realize what's happening. By the time you see it clearly, it's already too late to turn back. I saw it in her eyes first. There was a sadness there, a quiet kind of pain that didn't belong to someone who had everything the world said she should want. It was the kind of look you only recognize if you felt it yourself, the feeling of being trapped in a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels suffocating within. We never spoke about it. Not at first. But silence has its own language, and somehow, we both understood it. The first real crack in everything came on a day that felt completely ordinary. The sky was dull, the air heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. I remember thinking how strange it was that something so ordinary could feel so significant. She was standing alone, away from the crowd, her usual calm replaced with something fragile. For the first time, she didn't look untouchable. She looked human. And without thinking, without considering the consequences, I walked toward her. That was the moment everything changed. Because once you take that step, there's no pretending anymore. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. But the distance between us disappeared, replaced by something undeniable. It was in the way she looked at me, like she had been waiting for that moment without even knowing it. And in that instant, all the rules we had never spoken about became meaningless. But reality has a way of reminding you what's at stake. The world didn't change just because we did. Every moment after that felt like walking on the edge of something fragile, something that could shatter at any second. We were careful, painfully careful, but even the smallest connection felt like a risk. And yet, we kept going. Because love, once it begins, doesn't ask for permission. It demands courage. But courage comes at a cost. Whispers started first. Small, almost harmless, but enough to make people look twice. Enough to make us aware that we were no longer invisible. Every glance, every shared moment, every second we spent in the same space carried a weight that grew heavier with time. I saw the fear in her then. Not fear for herself, but for what it would mean if everything came crashing down. For her family. For the life she had been raised to protect. For the future that had already been decided. And for me. Because if there was one thing we both knew, it was that I had the most to lose. I wasn't protected by status or power. If things went wrong, I would be the one left standing alone, carrying the consequences of a love that was never supposed to exist. There were nights I told myself to walk away. To let her go before it was too late. But every time I tried, something pulled me back. Not just the way she made me feel, but the way she saw me. Like I mattered. Like I was more than the life I had been given. And maybe that was my weakness. Or maybe it was my strength. Because love isn't always about choosing the safe path. Sometimes, it's about choosing the one that feels impossible. The breaking point came sooner than we expected. It always does. One mistake. One moment where caution slipped, and the world we had been carefully balancing began to fall apart. The details didn't matter as much as the result, the truth was no longer hidden. And the consequences were immediate. Everything changed overnight. The quiet glances turned into accusations. The silent understanding turned into confrontation. The invisible walls around her life became solid, impenetrable barriers. She was taken away, from the places we used to see each other, from the life that had allowed even the smallest connection between us. And I was left behind. Alone, with nothing but memories and the crushing realization that some loves are not meant to survive the world they exist in. Days passed. Then weeks. And for a while, it felt like that was the end of our story. But love has a strange way of refusing to die. Even when everything else tells it to. I don't know what changed for her in those days. I don't know what battles she fought, what words were said, what choices were placed in front of her. But I know this, she didn't forget. Because one day, when I had almost convinced myself to move on, she came back. Not quietly. Not hidden. But with a determination I had never seen before. There was still fear in her eyes, but there was something stronger now. Choice. For the first time, she wasn't standing behind the walls built for her. She was stepping beyond them. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Love isn't just about falling. It's about standing. Standing against expectations, against fear, against everything that tells you to give up. We didn't know what would happen next. We didn't have a perfect plan or a guaranteed future. All we had was each other, and the courage to face whatever came with that. And somehow, that was enough. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories aren't the ones where everything is easy. They're the ones where everything is against you, and you choose love anyway. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles. And more importantly, tell us in the comments, have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to?